Our second split has been full of strife. It's been full of teams that we expected to do a whole lot better than the prior splits, having a little bit of a tumultuous period of time throughout this semester, but it's the playoff period, and now we return with Tilt Proof. We're kicking things off here for the Valorant side of things. I'm Infernos, joined by Ancient Angel and Mick. Let's get this one underway. Everything has finally reached this moment. All the teams we made to playoffs now get to fight for their chance once again to shine in grand finals, but the stakes are that much higher. Now having a full semester behind them as showing who was top dog our prior split. Dallas, I feel like we've seen a lot this semester. Ancient Angel, I feel like we've seen too much this semester, it feels like, from these teams, but there's still plenty of questions I feel that need to be answered.
Definitely.
I think
that's an understatement.
Understatement, maybe, sure. Let's go ahead and start up on the first one, though. We talked a lot about what kind of met last semester, what happened last split, what the overall standings felt like for them. And we didn't see a whole lot in the actual split. I feel like the same thing happens here. Teams didn't look that hungry. Teams looked maybe a little bit too hungry at certain moments, and it kind of turned into a really dangerous comparison for that third, fourth, and fifth spot. Ancient Angel, our playoff bracket was kind of a dicey one to choose who was going to even get third seed, let alone fourth and fifth afterwards.
Dude, I mean, listen, it was one of those week 7s where literally every game mattered. Like, way too much. Like, we had the battle for first seed, we had the battle for the 6th seed, we had the battle for the 3rd seed. There was a game in there where I think it was the St. Clair Stony Brook game, which also ended up determining seeding. Too much stress happened in week 7, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we had a three-way tie as well for third place. That was West Virginia, Stony Brook, and St. Clair, Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, per usual, that's what we ran into last split as well. So, I mean, kind of what do you expect out of them? Boise State, I mean, looked a little bit better kind of coming into the fray, but didn't really get themselves to that same scene and knock either one of those kind of 3 teams down, which, I mean, we were kind of hoping would happen early on inside the semester, but we just didn't really get that same kind of glimmer of hope, or at least get that momentum strolling off what we kind of thought was going to happen for them.
Yeah, but I didn't feel like there were very many questions again, right? 2 splits in a row for Maryville. They were the undisputed #1 team. Maybe some questions in that final week, like Ancient, you touched on for a little bit there, saying the last week was the most important one, that instead of week 1, like last split, where you saw Maryville and Winthrop face off against each other, it took until the final week to see this occur. Obviously, Maryville coming away the victor and taking that first place seed, but that then kind of leads us into our first really big question. Will Maryville ever lose a map? This was the big question going into grand finals as well, and they lost the first 2, but then things turned around and they ended up sweeping through the remainder.
You know, I'm going to mention this because, and we'll touch on it more later. The most amount of rounds that Maryville ever lost this split in one map was 8. That was the closest map they ever had, was 13-8. I'm going to be so real. I don't know if you can stop this team. I genuinely believe they're going to go undefeated throughout the playoffs. Like, I think they're going to go 5-0 on maps. I don't, there's no world where they even lose a map.
I don't know about that. I mean, considering that, I mean, we did talk to the likes of Maryville whenever it came to the end of their matchup against West Virginia, and they said just a week prior they'd actually lost the map against them in another league. So, I mean, it was relatively, you know, kind of relevant here. It was relatively just not too far off, and that's kind of the big thing there is, I mean, Maryville, while they've always been strong, I mean, we saw the likelihood of St. Clair knock them down a notch during the grand finals of last semester. And, I mean, seemingly, if we're looking at a grand final situation between them and Winthrop, then, I mean, they should be able to at least take one, because obviously, I mean, you got the likes of a BO5, not a BO3 like what we saw in the final of week 7. So, I mean, I think there's a shot for them to at least lose a map, because, I mean, as you said, those 8 rounds are in hand. Even if it's kind of not being taken too seriously from either one of these 2 teams, there's still kind of a bit of a respect battle going on here where they know that they're both the top dogs when it comes around to not even just here in D1, but CVAL in general, and there's kind of a precedent to be set there.
Listen, Maryville just played Winthrop in week 7, and Maryville won 13-2, 13-4. It was like,
hey man, I'm just saying,
it was bad. I'm willing to put so much on Maryville going undefeated. I will shave my beard if they lose one map. If they lose a series, I'll shave my head.
That's it. So I also want to point out here, because I think it's important, here at Tilt Proof, these are our opinions here, the talent that have spectated, casted every one of these matches. So there's no hard concrete evidence bar being there for every single match in series. And I think these are pretty big words to say for. Big words from Ancient Angel to straight up say they will shave their head.
I will.
if they lose out of a series.
lose a series, I will shave my head.
I think the Ancient Angel haters out there are going to be very much preying on Maryville's downfall to this point. But I think that leads over to a pretty good segue to our second question, which was Winthrop's dominance with their roster fluidity, how much they were changing up their roster overall right throughout it. And they did that as well in that matchup. I believe you were casting at Ancient Angel. They did that in the matchup against Maryville between map 1 and map 2. It worked in nearly every other series. In fact, it did work in every other series prior to that one. It felt like every week they came in with a new 5. Sometimes the same core 2 or 3. Obviously, Infiltrator and Governor were gone for a very long time, but they were still able to constantly not just beat, but dominate the opponents they were facing. That didn't work in this final week. And Ancient Angel, I think you're the best person to ask for this. Why was that the case in comparison to the weeks before?
So the biggest thing for Winthrop that we talk about week to week, and we praise them for being one of the most fluid teams in the league, probably second to Maryville. We praise them for being this team that has so much consistency surrounding its players that they can come back from huge deficits. Like they were able to come back from like a 10-2 deficit or a 2-10 deficit against Boise State. Like they're always on that kind of level. But the problem that they're gonna run into, especially in playoffs, is everyone's going to be running their starting 5 in playoffs. Barring extreme circumstances, there's not going to be an excuse to miss a playoff game. So if you're still going to do that fluidity, you can, but you're probably going to get punished for it because now you're going up against the main guys who practice every single day together.
Man, simple agreement there. Honestly, I mean, looking at Maryville, it was early in the season where I feel like we saw the majority of the changes, obviously, kind of with Governor and Infiltrator out. But, I mean, once they came back in, it didn't really feel like they missed a beat too much. I mean, everything kind of felt like it was same old, because Winthrop's kind of one of those teams where they're not, I never feel, oddly enough, the dominance out of Winthrop. I always feel more so the consistency. Like, they feel like those kind of guys that show up to their job, and they're spectacular. You know, they're managers of the store or the chain or whatever they run, and they just kind of keep things working. But Maryville is one of those teams where it feels like a regional manager. They come in and then, you know, even then they're like, okay, you know what? Everybody tighten up, make sure every shelf is perfect, make sure every single floor is squeaky clean where you can lick off them. Like, things like that. And, I mean, Winthrop, they are always consistent where they can manage to find those wins. And, I mean, obviously that game against Maryville, I still genuinely feel like that's a fluke to a degree. I mean, they're still trying to figure things out. They understand. I mean, they could have also comprehended during that final matchup that they're getting second seed no matter what. So they can kind of just throw whatever at the wall, see what sticks. They know they're going to have second seed. They know they're going to have a bye. And they know that once they get around to grand finals, they should have that ironed out, I feel.
So I guess that kind of brings the question, did they care enough going into the final week to bring their primary roster, knowing they'd get second seed and it wouldn't be a big deal? Or did they just treat it as another matchup against Maryville? They don't want to show their cards early. I don't have the answer for that inherently. I think only the players themselves do. But we talked a lot about our first and second seed, y'all, too. And I think now we could jump on over to what our third, fourth, and fifth kind of look like. The big one kind of being St. Clair. Yeah. A really tumultuous team this split, and they weren't a different story last split, right? Last semester they struggled. They did not have a great initial semester, but then they turned it over in the grand finals and playoffs, getting to the grand finals, shutting down what we consider to be the second best team to that point of West Virginia, even putting numbers up against Winthrop also losing out against Stony Brook, right? All of these things that took place to get St. Clair there, we're not seeing that same St. Clair. And Das, I know you have a lot of opinions about, the Jazzy kids not playing and that feeling like a really good system role for that, but then we got Woody back into play, and this felt like the JP Woody combo was here all over again. This is the St. Clair time to shine, but then them having to bring Seth back into the roster away from just the generic coaching role that he's so talented at. There's a lot on the table for St. Clair, but it just hasn't worked as well as I think it could have or should have this semester.
I don't even know if we see that same St. Clair. I mean, obviously they can feel right to prove me wrong. I mean, when we talked to Seth when it came around to the interviews, he understood what was at stake there. He knew they weren't playing to the same expectation and to the same standard of what they were prior. They were well aware of that. And I don't think St. Clair's a team that kind of care too much about outside variables and carry that burden too much and really let it weigh them down. But, I mean, it's not even just a Jazzykin situation. It's Taiga as well also not being around. It's just two massive players where Taiga, I feel like you could genuinely slot this guy in anywhere, and he would make everyone's lives so much easier. I mean, obviously, Tillo's still around. Woody's been kind of doing all right there, but even in that JP Woody kind of duo you mentioned, those two are usually playing on opposite sides of the map. Yeah. It doesn't really feel much like a duo. It just kind of feels like, all right, we're seeing kind of a recollection of old memories on a different team that would have had a different synergy and a different way of operating. But on St. Clair, it kind of feels like they like to build this barrier that stretches across the entire map, especially on the defense. And JP's usually by himself anyways. I mean, you can put this guy off in some random team from Zimbabwe, and he would still do the same exact thing. He would play a side on his own. He would make sure to get a couple of frags, and every now and again he can make a call to kind of go for the retake. The big question to me is what Seth is going to be doing, because he's usually played the control over the course of the season, and he's performed fairly well when you put him in that situation. As a controller, kind of lurking around the map, finding some free kills here and there, kind of getting in the scuffle and coming out on top from those. But St. Clair just recently was also trying Seth out. Well, I remember a Haven map, which is one of their biggest picks because they love those 3-site maps. He ended up running the Phoenix on there, and I was like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't think it was a terrible idea, but it's just not the same kind of control we see out of this team. They don't really run very many kind of duelists. They kind of run a singular one. They usually like to opt in for the double controller, the double sentinel. They like to have control of the map, and getting down and dirty and getting really just kind of in the mix is not really ever their game plan. And what we saw so consistently from last season was those smokes with Taiga and Tillo. They would find free 2 to 3 kills every single round through those smokes. When those aren't present, you don't have that same game plan anymore.
I've never seen someone's presence more missed on a team than Taiga on St. Clair. Like, you talked about the Phoenix for St. Clair on Haven with Seth. That was literally Taiga's old role. They would run that comp on Haven, and Taiga would be on the Phoenix, and Taiga would go like 30-16, and not even, he could go like 30-10 on that map. It was absolutely ridiculous. It's just one of like the most unfortunate situations of this semester.
Well, I think that's a tone to set for St. Clair, and that's kind of been the big question. I know you didn't like when we were storyboarding throughout the semester, HNA was talking about, well, unfortunately, St. Clair kind of is at the gates of fraud watch, right? That was the big term. Saying how close are they to being a fraud? How close are they to still being the same team that made grand finals? And that was always the comparator. And, comparison is the thief of joy for programs, for players, for individuals, no matter what it is, but especially right now in Division One, it felt like in that second split. If they compared themselves to where they were, making grand finals, getting there, putting 2 maps up on Maryville, forcing it to all 5, right? That type of concept, they most definitely were in the definition of a fraud in Fraud Watch, but I don't think they need to sit in that spot. I think they are plenty happy. They managed to get third. It came down to tiebreakers and round differentials to put them there and place there over West Virginia and Stony Brook.
Thank God for Breeze, right? I mean, that was, let's be real, that's
Breeze.
Exactly what it was.
Literally get it because of Breeze.
Yep.
So we actually have a standing, Dallas, that is confirmed because of your favorite map. I know how much this gets you happy.
Well, I mean, the fact is, nobody ended up it was more times than not like a second map or a third map, but even then, understandably, at the end of the season, teams started banning it out because they understand, well, this is obviously a kind of new St. Clair signature when it used to be that Lotus, when it used to be that Haven, kind of those 3-site maps. Not anymore. Obviously, because in that map, I always talk about the efficiency of weapons, where on that map, honestly, your Guardians are looking like better options than your Vandals and Phantoms, where your Marshals go absolutely crazy. The Outlaw starts to shine out a little bit more, even on full buy rounds, if you kind of want to look at your eco situation long term. Breeze, though, is just not a very popular map, and if they end up actually going, because, obviously, we're going to be looking at the bans. We're going to see how things go if they move on to that secondary round, and even then, I I think it's a no-brainer. We're going to see Winthrop probably just ban that one out because, I mean, they've done it before, and even then, if they're going to week number 2, they're at least going to watch the game, and they can at least look at the outliers, and that map is a singular one. I mean, we've always asked players about bans and picks. We've tried to get their opinion on it. Half the time, we don't get the IGL, so they're like, we don't know. Well, we do, and it's just, Breeze is way too easy of a selection, even if the coach is making that call, because you just don't take them there. Beyond that, though, like I said, just their old signatures. Lotus being out, I think, also. That's another topic we could bring up, but it's not on the docket. But I think Lotus killed plenty of teams here. Lotus, I think, with so many teams kind of like freebie, go-to, like the scent, whatever the case may be. And that being out of rotation, I think everybody just kind of really started slowing down.
Do we know, speaking of map pool, do we know if the playoffs is the new maps or if it's still the same 7 from the spring? I think it comes out in like a week as of filming.
I feel like it would be. That's what Lotus and Fracture stepping in. So
yeah, Lotus would be back.
That would be, I think, for St. Clair, that'd be a saving
we
grace. But I
retained the
also
old
think St.
map
Clair
pool.
relied on Jabbykins on that map for Breach.
Yeah,
so.
we retained the old map pool during the last playoffs, but I don't know about this one.
No,
Not, Slate is
okay.
making the call to quarantine a new map pool, so we're not bringing it out. Interesting. It's an interesting. It's a decision to be made that I think will actually help out a lot of these teams in comparison. Mostly because Fracture. If I'm looking at a set of 3 teams that really know that map, my immediate vision would be on West Virginia, Maryville, and Winthrop.
Yep.
West Virginia have just always looked good on that map. They played it very well throughout the CDL championships and through playoffs and all that. So I think that would be the team I would look at to kind of dominate. We don't really need to touch on them. In fact, they're not even in our list for things to touch on. That's Donnybrook and West Virginia game. We'll kind of go down the predictions of that and talk a little bit on them when we get over to our prediction segment. But our last segment, the same side of the bracket, right? This first matchup, Boise State facing off against St. Clair, the team that we say struggled to meet their own expectations. Now a team that has met the same expectations of them as the prior split, getting in, squeaking in as that 6th seed into playoffs. Now Boise State has to bring up the big question. Ancient Angel, I'm going to call you out for this one. This one's yours. The big question, what are their chances in that 6th seed? Are they just happy to be here, or do they actually have a chance to knock someone out?
Okay, so let's think about this for a second, right? If we have the bracket pulled up, then it would be Boise State versus St. Clair in the quarterfinals. And I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you that Boise State's a team where we're thinking, oh, they could go all the way. I think that's a very, very hard thing for them to do. But, and I do say but here, as someone who predicted against Boise State for the entirety of the fall, and then going into the spring, was still trying to figure out this team's identity. I am a sucker for graduating players, okay? I just have to believe in them. And the fact that you have, like, almost half of this team graduating, like Skies and Master are both graduating, they looked so good. And this is the surprising thing. This is the technically true stat. Out of all 6 other teams in Division One, the team that performed best against Maryville in the spring split was Boise State. Boise State took the most rounds off Maryville out of any other team in Division One in the spring split.
That's a stat of all time.
Yeah.
I think your question is, does the stat matter?
Yes. I've seen the highlights of this team. I am a true Boise State believer at this point. Okay,
They look so much better than last split. To be fair, they do.
Yeah.
I mean, we were able to kind of at least see their introduction for the split, casting on that Monday. But beyond that point, I mean, that was the one win we saw where we're like, hey, I mean, look at what we got here. And then you just kind of check up on stream, you're like, oh. It's just, again, week after week after week. And I think, honestly, like, you can only be disappointed so many times. So I genuinely do feel like there's going to be a point where they can kind of actually, you know, really make a running. Because keep in mind, during the last playoffs, like, they do tend to take those a little more seriously. Let's be real. I mean, every team's going to do that. And Boise State looked much, much better during that playoff stage, during that round number 1. While it didn't kind of go the full stretch, while it didn't really kind of draw out that long, I mean, the rounds did start to count up, and Boise State definitely did care more. Is it enough to topple St. Clair? I'm going to have to see what the map selections look like for that, because, I mean, obviously, same thing with the map pool. I'm just going to go ahead and say we're probably going to go and work with the same map pool we've been playing with all semester, because that was what we did last semester. So by, just reference of what we've done, history repeats itself. But if we're sticking with the same one, that's where things get a little bit ugly. Because, I remember their bind specifically during that last split. It went the distance. We saw them really kind of carry that thing on. Obviously, Master, when you look at it on the Yoru, kind of constantly playing that agent out, especially now kind of introducing the Clove. That's what I remember freaking out about, was the fact I was like, oh my god, like, did we have to threaten Master with taking away his scholarship to hop on a different agent besides Yoru? And, well, even then, still on the Clove, dude performed well. Just put him in a situation where he's trying to frag out, where he's creating chaos, and, well, he can do that. I think, honestly, St. Clair, with that new disconnect they have, I feel, where Ty can just kind of slot it in there and just wiping the floor clean, there's definitely a chance for it to be drawn out. If not in an entire map, I would say we can at least expect a 13-11 to draw these guys out.
So I think that brings forward the other question, because let's be honest, it's not been the same last semester to this semester. Obviously, West Virginia lost Inox. I think the big conversation point for them was they were trying to have one last big hurrah with their initial starting five. Heading into playoffs, we called them the dark horse. They played really well, and then they just lost to St. Clair, and then obviously put them in the grand finals instead. It feels like this is a mixture of Boise State being both now a lot better than they were the prior split, which we'd love to see. I think the same thing can be said for Ohio State and Utah. But at the same time, this is also that 3, 4, 5, and maybe even arguable second and maybe first. Big question on Maryville. They just always look great. It's hard to say anything against them. Not all of them look as good as they did the last split either. So it's a mixture, I think, for Boise State to be playing better, but also every team to be not maybe at the same success stories they had the prior split. So is there a chance they take down St. Clair? This would be the St. Clair roster to do it against when they're still in their growing pains. Pray they don't come out with the same playoff St. Clair that came out last split, where they were iffy entering into the actual playoff stage and then in playoffs dominated. Pray that they do not redo the exact same thing all over again, because then that obviously throws that bottom side of the bracket against Winthrop as well again, kind of out the window for a big question mark of what's actually going to go down. So anything can happen. Boise State looks good, but so does every other team going into this one, and they're the 6th seed for a reason. And I think this is, they have to prove to everybody they have improved by leaps and bounds, and they have to say this is the last big hurrah for some of these players, like you're mentioning Ancient Angel, to make that a worthwhile effort. And with that being said, let's go and jump on over to the bracket itself. I touched on that St. Clair versus Boise State game side. Now we can finally jump over and talk about that West Virginia versus Stony Brook. West Virginia we categorized as a dark horse a lot throughout this Tilt-Proof side going into playoffs. Most definitely can't do the same thing this time. They struggle a lot of matches, but so is Stony Brook. It's been really iffy. Stony Brook's record kind of marred by them having substitutions in week 2 and 3. It's a big question mark. Ancient Angel, what do you think about this matchup?
This is going to be, it's going to, one of two ways, okay? It's either going to be the best matchup we're going to have in playoffs. I'm talking like 90 rounds minimum. It doesn't end. This is going to be like the El Clasico of Division One. Or West Virginia is just going to bulldoze their way through into the semis. I don't know which. I am, to this day, still a big believer in this West Virginia team. Even compared to last semester, I think this West Virginia team is better than the West Virginia of yesteryear. And I credit that to Leone. I credit that to the calling that he's brought to this team. I credit that to the advancements that they've made in, 2 months as a roster. They look like an insanely better team, like 1,000% better in week 6 and 7 than compared to weeks 1 and 2. Hands down.
I think the big difference as well, and Dallas, you and I had the interview with Leone early on. They scouted Leone, right? Like they wanted him specifically. This was not, hey, we need to pull a 6th player for a second roster. We need to find somebody at the school, at the university, in the program to kind of come into this fit and roll. No, they said, we want this person. We're going to go ahead and get them, and we're going to make them the IGL and step into a system that they're not used to. And obviously, they were growing pains. It's been rough. And a lot of that was because of Leone. Let's be honest, the early weeks was rough for the team.
No. Do not put that on Leone. Okay, so here's the thing.
Here we go.
Go for it. Talk to him.
Was the one who was always on West Virginia last semester, giving them their praises. But we are not going to sit here and be clip farming and say that they are better than yesteryear, first off. And second off, we are not going to put all that pressure on Leone. So let me go ahead and debunk fact number one, or opinion number one. You had Yearn and Gucci leading the stats for the entirety of the split, and there was no stopping them. Even Maryville and Winthrop teams couldn't compare to what these two guys were putting on their shoulders. Gucci has not played to the same extent that he during that last split. I mean, quite frankly, I remember every single week it was an easy call. I thought it was gonna be such an easy kind of throwaway caster that like, hey, I like it. Let's hype up Gucci a little bit. And Gucci's like, oh, my mouse has like been disconnected for the past 4 rounds. It's like, okay, that one's in the garbage. Next one though, Leone. I mean, you can't put all that pressure on him because when you do have stat leaders like that, Inox, honestly, with what he was doing, I don't think the shot calling is making that big of a difference. They were genuinely just frying. And keep in mind, when Yearn stepped out, A77, we saw that stat dip right there because obviously you're going from Yearn to A77, but that wasn't a massive kind of like holdback for him. It wasn't an anchor. It was a bit of a hurdle, albeit. But A77 has come into form during that team, and that's why they look so good, because I'm like, oh my god, like, it wasn't them falling and scraping their knees. It was literally them just stumbling for a second and getting right back into running. We haven't seen them build that momentum this semester yet. I mean, because we obviously can go ahead and look at Utah and Ohio State, and those being the bottom two teams, where Utah still, unfortunately, couldn't pull out a win. Ohio State also in the same exact situation where they only pull off that one. But it's still, like, very iffy all over the place where, I mean, those are the two that you're factoring in almost instantaneously, which West Virginia, that's a litmus test of it. That is not something to brag about. That is not something, that is just more so, do we deserve to be in this league? Because that's the bottom line there. And if we can maintain in the middle, we should be able to at least iron out. And that's why in the situation they're in. Because they weren't able to pull that out. They weren't able to get themselves into shoes where they could take that round differential, take that map differential. And that, I think, honestly, the only thing we could give Leone in terms of any kind of flack would be the difference maybe inside of those tiebreakers where you're looking at a couple rounds. But beyond that, I think he's done a great job. But you cannot give that guy too much flack because when you have Yearn on your team and Gucci dropping like 30 kills every time you go bind, there is, I would wish that upon any team inside of D1 because that map would look free as all get out.
But that's what I'm saying though, is they don't have Gucci who's dropping 30 anymore. They don't have Yearn.
They still got Gucci though.
Yeah, but Gucci's mouse has been disconnected for 4 rounds in a row, like you said. Like, I don't get how we could, I don't understand how we could even talk about this team being like, if you want to say they're performing worse, sure. But as a team, as they fit together, like piece by piece as a roster, they have been miles ahead. If Leone makes a call, the rest of the team dives on it. They're on it. They are together. They're behind a team that looks as fluid as Maryville. Maybe they're not shooting as well, but they look as fluid as Maryville.
Yeah, I think this is a end of semester thing for them as well, right? You talked about the hurdle, Dallas, you know, losing Yearn, Gucci having to step out of the system, same with A77. I think Leone's growing pains, and when I'm saying it's Leone's fault for the early problems, it's just because they're stepping into a new system. That's not a dig at the player. First off, I love him to death. The interview we had him at the beginning of the semester was one of the best ones we've had here in Division One.
Like,
very sweet.
His attitude, I would love to have in the server.
I think I said after that was like, if we go to land, like at any point with this player, I want him on the desk somehow. Like, let them lose immediately, put them on the desk. Like, we thought it would be very fun. But this, they obviously had trouble at the very beginning, and again, it's going to come off of the IGL coming into a brand new system. Yes, they were sought after, but it doesn't change. It's a new system for them. So that kind of comes into this egg. Stony Brook, though, did have a ridiculously good last weekend, Dallas, and that's going to then throw things up. How is this matchup going to go down? So let's cut to our super fast segment about each person's predictions. I'll go Ancient Angel, then Dallas, then me. We'll go through each round, predicating on who we think the one last goes into it and how Grand Final is going to turn out. Obviously, West Virginia versus Stony Brook up first. Ancient Angel.
It's going to be so close. It's going to be so close, but I have to go West Virginia.
Dallas.
I'm in the same boat. West Virginia, probably a 2-1, if that, but nothing crazy.
Yeah, I think 3-map series, West Virginia. For sure that. Now turn over St. Clair versus Boise State, Ancient.
I talked about it. I said it. There's something about this team that I don't know. Maybe Daimyo's gotten into my head from that interview that I did with him last week. But I'm going Boise State. There's something in the air.
Well, you have a believer every semester, and last semester it was Nerd, so maybe you're the key, because I'm still going St. Clair.
I think even with St. Clair's growing pains and the very obvious problems that they've had, I still think it gets given to St. Clair, but I think Boise State either force a third map or put up 10 rounds every map to put the stress up on St. Clair's chest. Let's jump over, though, with the predictions we've had. Maryville versus West Virginia, since that was the team we kind of were universal about. How are you thinking on that one, Ancient?
Maryville.
Okay.
Maryville.
All right. Yeah, I think Maryville, it's hard to root against them. I think that's a tough one. But Winthrop, a team that now has had a loss on their record. Let's say that it is St. Clair going there, Ryan, in the 2-1 split over you, Ancient. Sorry, I apologize. But how do we view that Winthrop versus St. Clair matchup?
I'm not gonna lie. Either way, I would say Winthrop. I think Winthrop just looked so strong this semester, and I think there's only one team that can beat them.
I'm going to go Winthrop as well, but I think there is a shot at the 2-1 there. I do think St. Clair can pull out a map because we ran into it with Maryville last semester during the playoff season, and I think that was kind of a bit of a credit that they gave them inside of that 2-0 start there.
All right, I agree with Dallas. I think it's a 2-1 if it does get there, but it'll be Winthrop's ultimately at the end to move them on to the grand finals. I think they're pissed off after last split not getting there and getting shut down by Stony Brook, but we'll have to see how that ultimately pans out. Now, with Maryville and Winthrop being the teams that we've kind of edged off towards that finals, how are we viewing about this best of 5, a series we've now seen these two teams kind of go at each other with, I think, nearly 9 times now across mini leagues and divisions. Like, this is a tale as old as time, but it's been pretty back and forth.
I mean, listen, I think that this Winthrop team looks really good, right? I think STG being brought up into the main lineup, that guy's the truth. Okay, he's just absolutely insane. I think the work that Governor has done to become a leader in the server has also looked leaps and bounds ahead of what he was doing last semester. But dude, this Maryville team is genuinely like the Justice League, and any other team is just like I don't know how you compete with Maryville like that. I still give it to Maryville, and I'd say 3-0.
Yeah, I mean, you bet your beard on it, so I was hoping
I did.
at least
Bet your
remain
hair on it.
consistent there.
Well, hold on, I bet my hair on the series. If Maryville
Yeah.
loses series, I'll shave my head. But I mean,
I'm still in the school of thought. I mean, I believe that Maryville will win this one, but it'll be a 3-1. I don't think that we see them take them to the same kind of 2-map differential that we saw St. Clair. Like I said, I purely believe that was just a lapse in judgment by Maryville rather than a performance coming through from St. Clair. But that was also a St. Clair with Jazzykins and Tyga, which we saw be much better. So I think, I mean, honestly, I feel like Winthrop are kind of on that same thing. I feel like St. Clair and Winthrop, they could have kind of beat Winthrop too during that playoff run as well. So I think comparatively now, with Winthrop being the second in class, I think they only get one.
I don't think Winthrop showed their cool cards in the series this week. I think they still have more to come. Do I think it's enough to beat Maryville right now? I think Maryville are a historic team, historic program. I think they could be put up as the #1 of all time for collegiate Valorant right now. So I'm going to give it to Maryville, but I think it goes 3-2.
Like,
They
they're
are.
not
They
even
are.
Maryville. Like,
I think it's a 3-2 though, but you got to keep in mind
That's
Winthrop
McDonald's,
also
man.
plays the T2 level, right? Like this is a team that also is up there, but it's a 3-2 series. Maryville takes the win in my eyes, but it is what it is. It's a grand finals. I think it's going to be a great one if it comes true. Obviously, things can change. The scorelines can change up. West Virginia could lose out to Stony Brook. Stony Brook could somehow beat Maryville in the second round. St. Clair could be the team that makes it again, all over again into the grand finals. And this could be a Stony Brook versus St. Clair grand finals and be a shocker. We could get
Stony Brook
Boise
versus
State in the
Boise
grand
State.
finals.
Yeah.
there we go. That's what I'm talking about,
Anything
Scott.
can happen. But with that being said, it's happened here on Tilt Proof, and that's all we have for you. Coming into this week's episode, we'll have more, I believe, another episode coming up. But with that being said, my name is producer, joined by Ancient Angel and Mick. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you guys for the next one.